Chapter 8, Part 1. This is right after the boys climbed to the top. The search crew of Ralph and Jack and Simon climbed to the top and saw for sure that there was something sitting there that they think is the beast from air. Gift for the darkness. Piggy looked up miserably from the dawn-pale beach to the dark mountaintop. Are you sure? Really sure, I mean. I told you a dozen times now, said Ralph. We saw it. Do you think we're safe down here? How the hell should I know? Ralph jerked away from him and walked a few paces along the beach. Jack was kneeling and drawing a circular pattern in the sand with his forefinger. Piggy's voice came to them, hushed. Are you sure? Really? Go up and see, said Jack contemptuously, and good riddance. No fear. The beast had teeth, said Ralph, and big black eyes. He shuddered violently. Piggy took off his one round of glass and polished the surface. What are we going to do? Ralph turned to the platform. The conch glimmered among the trees, a white blob against the place where sun would rise. He pushed back his mop. I don't know. He remembered the panic flight down the mountainside. I don't think we'd ever fight a thing that size. Honestly, we'd talk, but we wouldn't fight a tiger. We'd hide. Even Jack'd hide. Jack still looked at the sand. What about my hunters? Simon came stealing out of the shadows by the shelters. Ralph ignored Jack's question. He pointed to the touch of yellow above the sea. As long as there's light, we're brave enough. But then, and now that the thing squats by the fire, as though it didn't want us to be rescued? He was twisting his hands now unconsciously. His voice rose. So we can't have a signal fire. We're beaten. A point of gold appeared above the sea, and at once all the sky lightened. What about my hunters? Boys, armed with sticks? Jack got to his feet. His face was red as he marched away. Piggy put on his one glass and looked at Ralph. Now you done it. You've been rude about his hunters. Oh, shut up. The sound of the inexpertly blown conch interrupted them. As though he were serenading the rising sun, Jack went on blowing till the shelters were astir and the hunters crept out to the platform, and the little ones whimpered as now they so frequently did. Ralph rose obediently, and Piggy and they went to the platform. Talk, said Ralph bitterly. Talk, talk, talk. He took the conch from Jack. This meeting, Jack interrupted him. I called it. If you hadn't called it, I should have. You just blew the conch. Well, isn't that calling it? Oh, take it. Go on, talk. Ralph thrust the conch into Jack's arms and sat down on the trunk. I've called an assembly, said Jack, because of a lot of things. First, you know now, we've seen the beast. We crawled up. We were only a few feet away. The beast sat up and looked at us. I don't know what it does. We don't even know what it is. The beast comes out of the sea, out of the dark, the trees. Quiet, shouted Jack. You listen. The beast is sitting up there, whatever it is. Perhaps it's waiting, hunting. Yes, it's hunting. Hunting, said Jack. He remembered his age-old tremors in the forest. Yes, the beast is a hunter, only... Shut up. The next thing is, we couldn't kill it. And the next is, Ralph said my hunters are no good. I never said that. I've got the conch. Ralph thinks you're cowards running away from the boar and the beast. And that's not all. There was kind of a sigh on the platform as if everyone knew what was coming. Jack's voice went up, tremulous yet determined, pushing against the uncooperative silence. He's like Piggy. He says things like Piggy. He isn't a proper chief. Jack clutched the conch to him. He's a coward himself. For a moment he paused and then went on. On top, when Roger and me went on, he stayed back. I went too. After... The two boys glared at each other through screens of hair. I went on too, said Ralph, and then I ran away, and so did you. Call me a coward then. Jack turned to the hunters. He's not a hunter. He'd never have got us meat. He isn't a prefect, and we don't know anything about him. He just gives orders and expects people to obey for nothing. All this talk. All this talk? Shouted Ralph. Talk, talk. Who wanted it? Who called the meeting? Jack turned, red in the face, his chin sunk back. He glowered up under his eyebrows. All right, then, he said in tones of deep meaning and menace. All right. He held the conch against his chest with one hand and stabbed the air with his index finger. Who thinks Ralph oughtn't to be chief? He looked expectantly at the boys ranged round, who had frozen. Under the palms there was deadly silence. "Hands up!" said Jack strongly. "Whoever wants Ralph not to be chief?" The silence continued, breathless and heavy and full of shame. Slowly the red drained from Jack's cheeks, then came back with a painful rush. He licked his lips and turned his head at an angle so that his gaze avoided the embarrassment of linking with another's eye. "How many think—" His voice trailed off. The hands that held the conch shook. He cleared his throat and spoke loudly. "All right, then." He laid the conch with great care in the grass at his feet. The humiliating tears were running from the corner of each eye. "I'm not going to play any longer. Not with you." Most of the boys were looking down now at the grass or their feet. Jack cleared his throat again. "I'm not going to be part of Ralph's lot." He looked along the right-hand logs, numbering the hunters that had been a choir. "I'm going off by myself. He can catch his own pigs. Anyone who wants to hunt when I do can come too." He blundered out of the triangle toward the drop to the white sand. "Jack!" Jack turned and looked back at Ralph. For a moment he paused and then cried out, high-pitched, enraged, "No!" He leapt down the platform and ran along the beach, paying no heed to the steady fall of his tears. And until he dived into the forest, Ralph watched him. Oh, this has to be embarrassing for him, guys. I mean, like the ultimate humiliation, right? The first go-round, he wasn't voted chief. Ralph was. And now, even though he's trying to insult Ralph and say all the things that Ralph has done, calls for another vote, even his hunters don't vote for Ralph to not be chief anymore. So it's the ultimate push for Jack. He's so like humiliated and frustrated. He takes off and says he's no longer going to be part of the group. This is going to cause great contention, you guys. If this group splits and they can't get along and you have hunters against the shelterers, oh my gosh, like it's total chaos, but it won't work. They're not going to be able to survive without each other. So that's where part 1 pauses.